Have you ever been judged solely on how you look, even when you were the most powerful person in the room? Captain Richard Sterling, a veteran pilot with an ego larger than his aircraft, thought he could humiliate his new co-pilot, Maya Vance, just because of the color of her skin. He refused to fly with her, mocking her credentials in front of the entire crew. But Richard made a fatal calculation. He didn't realize that the woman he was trying to kick off the plane didn't just work there. She signed his paychecks. Watch to see the moment his career turns to ash. The morning sun glinted off the polished fuselage of the Gulfstream G650, sitting majestically on the private tarmac at Teterboro Airport, New Jersey. This wasn't just any flight. It was a high-stakes charter carrying executive board members of the oblivious Hargrave and Moore financial firm to a merger meeting in Zurich. Captain Richard Sterling adjusted his epaulets, admiring his reflection in the terminal glass. At 55, Richard was the picture of aviation authority. Silver hair, a jawline that had hardened with age, and a reputation for being technically flawless, if personally insufferable. He had flown for major commercial airlines for 30 years before moving to the lucrative private sector. He was used to deference. He was used to being the king of the cockpit. He checked his Breitling watch. 07 sharp. Where is the first officer? He muttered to the flight attendant, a nervous young woman named Sarah Jenkins. Dispatch said the replacement is on their way, Captain, Sarah said, smoothing her uniform. Apparently, Dave called in sick with food poisoning last night. Richard scoffed. Dave is weak. I need someone who can keep up. Hopefully they sent Harrison or Miller. I don't have time to babysit a rookie on a transatlantic haul. Just then, a black sedan pulled up to the aircraft steps. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was tall, poised, wearing a pristine pilot's uniform that fit her impeccably. She carried her flight bag with an ease that suggested thousands of hours of travel. She was also a black woman, with her hair pulled back in a strict, professional bun. Richard watched her ascend the stairs, his eyes narrowing behind his aviator sunglasses. He didn't move to greet her. He simply stood at the top of the stairs, blocking the entrance to the cabin. "Can I help you, miss?" Richard asked, his voice dripping with a patronizing sweetness that didn't reach his cold blue eyes. "Catering is usually loaded through the rear galley." The woman stopped 2 steps below him. She looked up, her expression unreadable, calm. "I'm not catering, Captain Sterling. I'm your first officer for this flight. Maya Vance." She extended a hand. Richard didn't take it. He stared at her hand as if it were covered in grease, then looked back at her face. A smirk curled the corner of his lip. "You?" Richard laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound. "Dispatch must be playing a joke. I asked for a qualified pilot, not a diversity hire from the academy." Maya's hand dropped slowly to her side, but her posture didn't waver. "I assure you, Captain, I am fully qualified. Type-rated on the G650 with over 4,000 hours on this specific airframe. Now, if you'll excuse me, we have a slot time to meet." She tried to step past him, but Richard sidestepped, physically blocking her path again. The air on the tarmac grew heavy. Sarah, the flight attendant, watched from the galley door, her eyes wide with panic. "Hold on," Richard snapped, his voice losing the fake sweetness. "You don't step foot on my aircraft until I say so. I don't care what paperwork you have. I know how the system works these days. They push people like you through to meet quotas, and I'm the one who has to correct your mistakes at 40,000 feet. I won't risk my license flying with an amateur." "I am not an amateur," Maya said, her voice remaining dangerously low and controlled. "And this is not your aircraft, Richard. It belongs to the charter company. You are an employee, just like me. We have a job to do." "I am the captain," Richard roared, causing a baggage handler on the ground to look up. "That means I am God up there. And I say you are not fit to fly. I want to see your logbook. I want to see your license. And even then, I'm calling dispatch to get a real pilot." Maya took a deep breath. She reached into her pocket, not for a logbook, but for her phone. "Richard, I suggest you step aside. The clients will be here in 20 minutes. You are wasting time." "I'm saving lives," Richard sneered. "I'm not flying with you. It's that simple. Either you walk away, or I tell the clients that the flight is grounded because the co-pilot is incompetent. Imagine how that will look on your record." He leaned in closer, invading her personal space. "Go back to commercial, sweetheart. Or better yet, go find a job where you don't have to touch expensive machinery." Maya held his gaze. For a second, Richard saw something in her dark eyes that unsettled him. Not fear, not anger, but a kind of pity. It was the look a parent gives a toddler throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. "Are you refusing to fly with me, Captain?" Maya asked clearly. "I need you to say it for the record." "I'm refusing to fly with a liability," Richard declared, crossing his arms. "I refuse to share a cockpit with you." "Understood," Maya said. She tapped the screen of her phone. "Sarah, please close the cabin door. Captain Sterling won't be joining us." Richard laughed, a loud, incredulous sound. "Excuse me? You think you can kick me off? I'm the senior pilot. I have 30 years of experience. You're nobody." "Sarah," Maya said, looking past Richard to the terrified flight attendant. "Close the door." Sarah hesitated, looking between the imposing, red-faced captain and the calm, stoic woman on the stairs. "Captain Sterling, maybe we should just call operations," Sarah squeaked. "I am calling operations." Richard pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling with rage. He dialed the number for the chief pilot, a man named Marcus Thorne. "I'm going to have you fired before you even unbutton your jacket." Maya didn't move. She waited on the stairs, the wind whipping a loose strand of hair across her face. She watched him dial. "Marcus!" Richard shouted into the phone. "It's Sterling. You need to fix this mess at Teterboro. You sent me a girl, a black girl. She claims she's the first officer. I grounded the flight until you send Miller." "What? What do you mean? Who is it?" "It's Maya Vance." "Yes, that's her name." Richard paused, listening to the voice on the other end. His face, flushed red with anger, suddenly went slack. The blood drained from his cheeks, leaving him pasty and pale. "What do you mean?" Richard whispered, his voice cracking. "Repeat that." Maya took one step up, bringing her face level with his. "Is there a problem, Captain?" Richard lowered the phone slowly, his hand shaking. He looked at Maya with a newfound horror. The voice of Marcus Thorne was still audible, tinny and shouting through the receiver. "Richard, you idiot! That's not just a pilot. That's Maya Vance. She's the CEO of Vance Aviation. She bought the company 3 days ago. She owns the damn plane." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the distant roar of a departing jet seemed to fade away. Richard Sterling stared at Maya, his mouth slightly agape, unable to process the information. Maya Vance, Vance Aviation. He had heard the rumors that the charter company was being acquired by a private equity group, but he hadn't bothered to learn the details. He certainly hadn't expected the new owner to be the young black woman standing in front of him, whom he had just insulted with every prejudice in his arsenal. Maya gently took the phone from Richard's limp hand. She put it to her ear. "Marcus? It's Maya." "Ms. Vance, I am so sorry." Marcus Thorne's voice came through, sounding frantic. "I tried to brief him on the new ownership structure, but he didn't check his email this morning. I will handle this immediately." "It's fine, Marcus," Maya said, her voice cool and crisp. "Captain Sterling was just explaining to me his philosophy on cockpit hierarchy and diversity. It was illuminating. Richard swallowed hard, a bead of sweat tracking down his temple. Miss Vance. I didn't know. Maya handed the phone back to him, but she didn't step aside. She stepped forward, forcing Richard to retreat into the cabin to avoid a collision. She followed him in, the heels of her boots clicking sharply on the metal stairs. You didn't know I owned the aircraft, Maya said, stepping into the luxurious cabin, smelling of leather and fresh coffee. Would it have mattered if I didn't? Would it have been acceptable to treat me that way if I were just an employee, Richard? I was just concerned about safety, Richard stammered, backing up until he bumped into a leather recliner. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the desperate scrambling of a man watching his pension go up in flames. We have high-profile clients. I have to be rigorous. Rigorous is checking a logbook, Maya said, removing her sunglasses. Racism is assuming I don't have one. She walked past him toward the cockpit, running her hand along the mahogany trim. I decided to fly this leg myself because I wanted to see how my fleet operates on the front lines. I wanted to meet my pilots. I checked your file, Richard. Impeccable flight record. Perfect attendance. But your crew evaluations, they were missing. She turned to face him. Now I know why. You intimidate them into silence. You bully them. That's not true, Richard lied, though his eyes darted to Sarah, who was busy pretending to arrange napkins in the galley, trying to make herself invisible. Sarah, Maya called out softly. The flight attendant jumped. Yes, ma'am? Has Captain Sterling ever made you feel uncomfortable or questioned your competence based on your gender? Sarah looked at Richard, who was glaring at her with a mix of pleading and threat. Then she looked at Maya, the woman who signed the checks. Sarah straightened her spine. Yes, Sarah said, her voice trembling but clear. On the flight to Cabo last month, he told me that women are too emotional for aviation and that I should be looking for a husband, not a career. Richard closed his eyes. Sarah, you know I was joking. It didn't feel like a joke, Sarah whispered. Maya nodded. Thank you, Sarah. She turned back to Richard. Pack your bag, Captain. Richard's eyes snapped open. What? You refuse to fly with me, Maya reminded him. I am granting your request. You are relieved of duty. Get off my plane. You can't do this, Richard argued, panic rising in his voice. The clients will be here in 15 minutes. You can't fly this bird alone. It requires 2 pilots. If you fire me now, you cancel the flight. You lose the contract with Hargrave and Moore. He found a shred of his old confidence. You need me. You might own the company. But right now, I'm the only one here qualified to sit in the left seat. So, unless you want to embarrass yourself in front of your biggest clients, we are going to fly this plane. I'm willing to overlook your deception if we can just get to work. Maya stared at him, incredulous. You are willing to overlook my deception? Richard, you are truly fascinating. I'm a realist, Richard said, straightening his tie. You can fire me when we get back to New Jersey, but right now, you're stuck with me. Maya checked her watch. He was right about one thing. The clients were arriving, and canceling the flight would cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars and severe reputational damage. But Richard had underestimated exactly how prepared Maya Vance was. You think I came here without a backup plan? Maya asked. I think you came here to make a point, and you made it, Richard said, moving toward the cockpit. Now let's fly. Stop, Maya commanded. Richard froze. I am not flying with you, Richard. Not today. Not ever. And I am certainly not letting you near the controls of a $60 million asset with that temper. Then who is going to fly? Richard shouted, gesturing to the empty seats. The stewardess? A heavy thud on the stairs outside made them both turn. A man appeared in the doorway. He was younger than Richard, perhaps in his late 30s, with a calm demeanour and a thick file tucked under his arm. He wore the uniform of a first officer, but he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a military veteran. "Reporting for duty, Captain Vance," the man said, nodding to Maya. Maya smiled. "Right on time. Richard, meet David Miller. He was the one who called in sick." Richard looked confused. "But," Dispatch said. "I told Dispatch to tell you he was sick," Maya revealed. "I needed to see how you reacted to a last-minute change. I needed to see how you treated a stranger. David has been waiting in the FBO lounge for my signal." David Miller stepped into the cabin. He looked at Richard with a distinct lack of respect. "I heard the shouting from the bottom of the stairs, Rick. Classy as always." "You set me up," Richard hissed at Maya. "I gave you a test," Maya corrected. "You failed. David will be taking the right seat. I will be taking the left seat as captain. You will be taking a taxi." Richard's face turned a violent shade of purple. "I have 30 years. You can't replace me with him. And you're a corporate suit. You can't command this ship. I was flying F-18s for the Navy while you were yelling at stewardesses, Richard," Maya said icily. "Now get off my plane before I have security drag you off. And Richard?" He paused at the door, defeated, clutching his flight bag like a shield. "Don't bother coming into the office tomorrow. Your personal belongings will be mailed to you." Richard stumbled down the stairs, humiliated, passing the luxury SUVs of the arriving clients. He had to shield his face as the CEO of Hargrave & Moore walked past him, greeting Maya with a warm handshake at the top of the stairs. Richard watched from the tarmac as the door closed. He was finished. Or so he thought. But men like Richard Sterling don't go down quietly. As he stood there, watching the engines of the G650 spool up, a dark plan began to form in his mind. He pulled out his phone again. He wasn't calling the office. He was calling the FAA hotline. If he couldn't fly, he was going to make sure Maya Vance didn't either. He would report an unsafe command atmosphere and unverified pilot credentials. He would ground her plane in Zurich. He would ruin her reputation before she even landed. "You want a war, lady?" Richard muttered to the wind. "You got one." While the Gulfstream G650 cruised smoothly at Mach 90, 45,000 feet above the Atlantic, a different kind of storm was brewing on the ground. Maya Vance was in her element. The cockpit was a sanctuary of calm precision. She and David Miller moved in a synchronized dance of checklists and radio calls. The earlier tension at Teterboro felt like a distant memory, replaced by the hum of the Rolls-Royce engines and the stunning curvature of the Earth visible through the windscreen. "You handle the radio with Shanwick Oceanic nicely," David remarked, adjusting the radar range. Richard always fought with the controllers. He thought his voice should be the only one on the frequency. Maya smiled, checking the fuel flow indicators. "Authority isn't about volume, David. It's about competence." Richard never understood the difference. But 3,000 miles away, Richard Sterling was busy proving that a loud voice, in the right ear, could still cause a lot of damage. Richard hadn't gone home. He sat in a dimly lit bar near the airport, a half-empty scotch in front of him, his phone glowing on the table. He was scrolling through his contacts, bypassing the standard company lines, and looking for the friendly numbers he had collected over 3 decades of flying. He stopped at a name, Inspector Dubois, EASA, Zurich. Jean-Luc Dubois was a mid-level bureaucrat within the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, specifically stationed in Switzerland. Richard had met him years ago at a conference, buying him expensive dinners to smooth over a minor paperwork infraction. Richard knew Dubois was a stickler for rules, but more importantly, he was a man who loved to exert power over arrogant operators. Richard dialed. "Hello? Jean-Luc, it's Richard Sterling, from the States. Richard, it has been a long time. Are you bringing the G650 to Zurich today?" "I'm not," Richard said, injecting a tone of grave concern into his voice. "And that's actually why I'm calling. I'm speaking to you off the record, as a friend, and as a pilot concerned for the safety of your airspace." The line went quiet. "Go on." "I was removed from the flight this morning," Richard lied smoothly. "The new owner, she's unstable, Jean-Luc. She forced her way into the cockpit. I have reason to believe she is not current on her medical exams and, frankly, her behavior this morning suggested she might be under the influence. I tried to stop the flight, but she threatened me." "Under the influence?" Dubois' voice sharpened. "And she is flying a commercial charter into Zurich?" "Carrying VIPs from Hargrave and Moore," Richard added, twisting the knife. "I didn't want to call the official hotline because I didn't want to cause a panic if I'm wrong. But if something happens over the Alps—" "You did the right thing calling me," Dubois said, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor audible. "We cannot have rogue pilots in Swiss airspace. I will prepare a reception." Richard hung up. A cruel smile spread across his face. He took a sip of his scotch. He knew exactly what would happen. A safety assessment of foreign aircraft, ramp check. But not a standard one. Based on a credible tip regarding pilot impairment, the Swiss authorities would be within their rights to ground the aircraft, detain the crew for drug and alcohol testing, and comb through every single page of the aircraft's maintenance logs. It would take hours, maybe days. The clients would miss their meeting. Maya would be humiliated. Her company would look like a circus operation. By the time she cleared her name, the contract would be dead, and Richard would be there to offer his services to Hargrave and Moore directly as a freelance consultant. 6 hours later, the GX50 began its descent into Zurich. "Zurich approach, Gulfstream 7 Mike Victor, checking in passing flight level 240, Maya broadcasted, her voice crisp. "Gulfstream 7 Mike Victor, Zurich approach. Expect ILS runway 14. Reduce speed to 210 knots immediately," the controller replied. The tone was unusually abrupt. Maya frowned. "Copy. Slowing to 210. 7 Mike Victor." She glanced at David. "That was sharp. Usually they let us keep speed up a bit longer." "Maybe it's busy," David shrugged. "Weather looks good, though." Maya greased the landing. The tires kissed the runway with barely a shudder, a testament to her skill. As they exited the runway and contacted ground control, the situation shifted from odd to alarming. 7 Mike Victor, hold position on taxiway Alpha. Do not proceed to the FBO. Shut down engines immediately. Maya and David exchanged a look. "Tower, 7 Mike Victor. Say again." "We have VIPs on board. We are cleared to the executive terminal." "Negative, 7 Mike Victor. Shut down engines immediately. Follow the Follow Me vehicle to the holding pad. You are being met by authorities." Maya's stomach dropped. She looked out the side window. 2 black vans with blue lights flashing were racing across the tarmac towards them. Behind them was a police cruiser. "What is going on?" David whispered. "I don't know," Maya said, her mind racing. "But keep the cockpit door closed until I say so. I don't want the client seeing this until we know what we're dealing with." She keyed the intercom to the cabin. "Mr. Hargrave, ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Vance. We have landed safely in Zurich. We've been asked to hold on the tarmac for a momentary customs inspection. Just a routine formality. Please remain seated." It was a lie, and she hated it. But as she watched 3 uniformed officers and a man in a high-visibility vest marked ESA Inspector approach the stairs, She knew this was anything but routine. The cabin door opened. The cool Swiss air rushed in, mixed with the scent of jet fuel and impending disaster. Maya stood at the top of the stairs, blocking the entry just as Richard had tried to do to her hours earlier. But these men weren't Richard. They were federal authorities. "Captain Maya Vance?" the man in the vest asked. He was holding a clipboard like a weapon. "That is me," Maya said calmly. "I am Inspector Dubois. By the authority of the Federal Office of Civil Aviation, this aircraft is grounded. You and your first officer are to step off the plane immediately for questioning and toxicology screening." "Toxicology?" Maya's voice rose an octave. "Inspector, this is absurd." "On what grounds? We just completed a 6-hour transatlantic flight, flawlessly." "We received a credible report regarding pilot impairment and falsified flight credentials," Dubois said loudly. Behind Maya, Mr. Hargrave emerged from the luxury cabin. He was a man who billed his time at $2,000 an hour, and he looked ready to bill Maya for every wasted second. "What is the meaning of this?" Hargrave demanded, adjusting his suit jacket. "We have a helicopter transfer waiting to take us to the summit." "Why are there police cars?" Dubois looked at the client. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience, but we have reason to believe this aircraft is not safe to fly. The pilot is under investigation." Hargrave turned to Maya, his face reddening. "Maya, what is he talking about? You told me everything was sorted with the new management." "It is, Mr. Hargrave," Maya said, fighting to keep her composure. "This is a mistake, a bureaucratic error." "It is not an error." Dubois stepped closer. "Captain Vantor, please descend the stairs. If you resist, you will be arrested." Maya saw the trap now. It was clumsy, brutal, and effective. She looked at Hargrave. "Sir, please take the transport to the terminal. I will have my operations team arrange a new helicopter for you immediately. I will deal with this. I promise you, this is a malicious accusation." Hargrave shook his head, disappointment etched in his features. "We took a chance on your company because of your father's reputation, Maya. This is embarrassing. Fix it, or don't bother flying us back." The clients were escorted onto a bus, leaving Maya and David alone on the tarmac with the inspectors. For the next 4 hours, Maya was subjected to a humiliating ordeal. She was breathalyzed right there on the tarmac. Then she was taken to a sterile room in the airport basement for a urine test. David was separated from her and questioned in a different room. They demanded her logbooks, her medical certificate, the aircraft's insurance papers, the noise certificate, and the maintenance release. Maya sat in the metal chair, watching Dubois flip through her documents with agonizing slowness. "Your medical certificate," Dubois noted. "The signature of the examiner looks smudged." "It's a stamp," Maya said, her teeth clenched. "Call the FAA database. It's all digital. You can verify my standing in 5 seconds." "Systems are down for maintenance," Dubois shrugged. "We have to verify manually. It could take 2 days." "2 days?" Maya stood up, slamming her hand on the table. "You know exactly what you're doing. Who called you? Was it a man named Richard Sterling?" Dubois didn't look up, but Maya saw his eye twitch, a micro-expression of guilt. "I protect the anonymity of my sources," Dubois said. "That's a yes," Maya hissed. "You are grounding a $60 million jet and jeopardizing a massive corporate merger because a disgruntled employee called in a favor? Do you know who I am, Inspector?" "You are a pilot under investigation," Dubois said smugly. "And until I sign this release, you are a tourist." Maya sat back down. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Getting angry wouldn't help. Richard wanted her to lose her temper. He wanted her to act like the unstable woman he had painted her to be. She needed to think like a CEO, not a pilot. "Fine," Maya said, opening her eyes. Her voice was deadly calm. "You keep the plane. Keep the books." She pulled out her phone. "You cannot make calls during an investigation," Dubois warned. "I'm not calling a lawyer," Maya said. "I'm calling the United States ambassador to Switzerland. He's a personal friend of my late father. And after that, I'm calling the vice president of operations at Gulfstream Aerospace. We're going to have them send a technical rep out here to verify the aircraft." She paused, looking Dubois in the eye. "And then, Inspector, I'm going to hire a private investigator to pull your phone records. If I find a single incoming call from a New Jersey area code in the last 12 hours, I will sue you personally for defamation and loss of revenue. I will take your pension, your house, and your badge." Dubois froze. The smugness evaporated. He was used to bullying charter pilots who feared losing their licenses. He wasn't used to dealing with women who had the number of the US ambassador on speed dial. "There is no need for escalation," Dubois stammered. "The escalation has already happened," Maya said, dialing. "David, get your bag. We're leaving." "You are not cleared to leave," Dubois shouted. "Am I under arrest?" Maya asked. "Did the breathalyzer show alcohol?" "No." "Did the drug screen show anything?" "No. My paperwork is in order." "You are holding me on a hunch. Unlawful detention is a serious crime here, isn't it?" She walked out of the room, David trailing behind her, looking awestruck. "That was intense," David said as they walked into the main terminal. "It's not over," Maya said, her face grim. She checked her email. There was a message from Hargrave and Moore. Subject: contract termination. Body: "Ms. Vance, due to the incident upon arrival, we are seeking alternative travel for the return leg. Our legal team will be in touch regarding a refund." Maya stopped in the middle of the busy terminal. The noise of the airport faded away. She had lost the client. Richard had won. She felt a vibration in her pocket. A text message. It was from an unknown number. "Hope the weather in Zurich is nice. Heard you ran into some turbulence." Maya stared at the screen. Rage, hot and blinding, flared in her chest, but then it cooled into something harder, something sharper. "David," she said, "book us a hotel, the most expensive one near the city center." "We're staying." "We're staying," Maya said. "I'm not going home with my tail between my legs. Richard thinks he grounded me. He thinks he stripped me of my power." She looked up at the departure board, her eyes scanning the flights. "He forgot one thing. I own the company, and I have access to the server logs." "What are you going to do?" David asked. "I'm going to catch him," Maya said. "Richard didn't just sabotage a flight. He committed a federal crime by making a false report to an aviation authority. And he did it while still technically on my payroll." She turned to David, a predatory smile finally breaking through her stress. "He wants to play dirty. Let's show him what happens when you play dirty with the boss. I need you to fly back commercial tonight." "Why?" "Because I need someone inside the Teterboro office to physically secure his employment file and the server backups before he realizes I'm on to him. Can I trust you?" David Miller straightened up. He remembered the way Richard had treated him for years. "Captain, I'd fly a cargo plane full of rubber dog poop out of Hong Kong just to see Richard Sterling lose his license. I'm in." "Good," Maya said. "Go, I'll handle Dubois and the client." As David ran toward the ticket counter, Maya turned back toward the glass windows, looking out at the tarmac. Her beautiful Gulfstream sat alone in a penalty box, surrounded by cones. "Enjoy your victory lap, Richard," she whispered. "It's going to be your last." The red-eye flight from Zurich to Newark was grueling, but David Miller didn't sleep. He sat in economy class, his laptop open, connected to the sluggish in-flight Wi-Fi, tunneling into the Vance Aviation secure server. Maya had given him the administrator keys before he left Switzerland. His mission was simple: find the digital smoking gun. Richard Sterling was old school. He didn't trust the cloud, but he was careless with physical devices. David knew that Richard used a company-issued iPad for his electronic flight bag, EFB. When Richard stormed off the plane at Teterboro, he had taken his personal flight bag, but David recalled seeing the company iPad sitting on the charging rack in the crew lounge earlier that morning. If Richard hadn't gone back inside the building to retrieve it, it was still there. And if Richard had used his personal cell phone to call Zurich, there might be no record. But if he had used the company's VoIP app on the iPad to save money on international calling rates, a habit Richard was notorious for, the log would be stamped, time-coded, and geolocated. David landed at Newark at 6:00 a.m. By 7:30 a.m., he was swipe-carding into the silent Vance Aviation offices at Teterboro. The hangar smelled of cold hydraulic fluid and floor wax. David moved quickly to the crew lounge. The charging rack was empty. His heart sank. Richard must have taken it. David began tearing the room apart. He checked the lockers. He checked the lost and found bin. Nothing. Just as he was about to text Maya the bad news, he saw it. Tucked behind the coffee machine, propped up to watch videos while brewing espresso, was the iPad. Richard had likely left it there while getting his morning coffee before the confrontation on the stairs. David grabbed it. It was locked. He pulled out his phone and dialed Maya. "I have the device. What's the passcode?" "Try 7474. Maya's voice came through, sounding exhausted but alert. "He's obsessed with the Queen of the Skies." David typed it in. The screen unlocked. He went straight to the calling app history. There it was, 07:15 a.m. Outgoing call, Switzerland, Perp 1. Duration, 4 mins 12 secs. "Got him," David whispered. "Send me the screenshot," Maya commanded. "And David, check his company email outbox. See if he sent anything else." David scrolled through the sent folder. His blood ran cold. "Maya, it's worse than the phone call." "What did he do?" "He emailed the client list," David said, his voice shaking. "At 8:30 a.m. yesterday, right after he left the airport. He forwarded the entire confidential client database, names, net worth, travel preferences, private security contacts, to his personal Gmail account. Then he sent an email to aviation, our biggest competitor." "Read it to me," Maya said. David read the text aloud. "To CEO, aviation. I am leaving Vance Aviation due to safety concerns with new management. I am bringing with me the Hargrave contract and the full Rolodex of high-value clients. Let's talk numbers. Captain Sterling." There was silence on the line. This wasn't just sabotage. This was corporate espionage. It was a felony. "He tried to steal my company from under me," Maya said, her voice dangerously quiet. "He didn't just want to ground me, David. He wanted to bankrupt me so he could sell the scraps to Apex." "What do you want me to do?" David asked. "Print everything," Maya said. "Then call Marcus Thorne, the chief pilot. Tell him to meet you at the office. Initiate a formal lockout of Richard's credentials. And David, call the police. I want a report filed for theft of proprietary data." "What about you?" David asked. "What about Hargrave?" "I have a meeting with Mr. Hargrave in an hour at the Dolder Grand Hotel," Maya said. "I'm going to show him exactly who Richard Sterling is." Back in Zurich, Maya sat in the lobby of the Dolder Grand. She wore a fresh suit, having slept only 3 hours. Opposite her sat Arthur Hargrave, the billionaire financier who had fired her company the day before. "Ms. Vanto, I appreciate your persistence," Hargrave said, looking at his watch. but my assistants are already booking a NetJets flight for this afternoon. We are done. Mr. Hargrave, I am not here to ask for the contract back, Maya said, placing a folder on the table. I am here to save you from a security breach. Hargrave paused. Excuse me? Yesterday, your personal data, including your home address and your children's school locations, was stolen, Maya said. Hargrave went pale. By whom? By the man who claimed I was unsafe, Maya said. She slid the printed screenshots David had sent her across the table. Richard Sterling stole our client list and offered it to a competitor. He used you, Mr. Hargrave. He used your flight as leverage to negotiate his own salary with another airline. He grounded your plane in Zurich not because of safety, but to damage my reputation so he could poach you. Hargrave picked up the papers. He read the email to Apex Jets. His eyes narrowed. Men like Hargrave didn't mind ruthless business tactics, but they hated being used as pawns. He compromised my privacy to make a sale, Hargrave murmured. The anger in his voice was seismic. I have spoken to the Swiss authorities, Maya continued. Inspector Dubois has admitted, off the record, that the tip came from a disgruntled former employee. I have the affidavit here. The alcohol test was negative. The drug test was negative. The plane is cleared to fly. Maya stood up. I will refund your flight fully, Mr. Hargrave, and I will pay for your NetJets flight home. I just wanted you to know the truth. She turned to leave. Miss Vance, Hargrave called out. Maya stopped. Cancel the NetJets flight, Hargrave said, tearing the screenshot in half. Is the G650 ready? It is fueled and waiting, sir. Good. Fly us home. And when we land, I want to be the one to tell Richard Sterling exactly what I think of his business ethics. 2 days later, Richard Sterling was sitting in his living room in New Jersey, feeling like a king. He had received a generic email from Vance Aviation Legal, confirming receipt of his grievances. In Richard's mind, that meant they were scared. He had already drafted a lawsuit demanding $2 million for wrongful termination and age discrimination. He figured Maya would settle out of court to avoid the bad press. His phone rang. It was Marcus Thorne, the chief pilot. Richard? Marcus sounded tired, defeated. Marcus, old buddy, how's the sinking ship? Richard laughed, leaning back in his recliner. It's not good, Rick. The board is freaking out. Maya is in over her head. She wants to meet. Does she now? Richard smirked. I bet she does. Tell her my lawyer does the talking. She doesn't want lawyers involved yet. Marcus lowered his voice. She wants to offer you a settlement package, a consulting fee to come back and smooth things over with the Hargrave account. She says she can't manage the clients without you. Richard felt a surge of triumph, so potent it was almost intoxicating. He had won. The little girl had realized she couldn't fly the big jets without him. I want an apology, Richard demanded. In writing. She's prepared to give you whatever you want, Rick. She just wants you to come to the hangar today at 2:00 p.m. She's flying back from Zurich now. She wants to sign the deal the moment she lands. Fine, Richard said. I'll be there. But tell her I want the corner office. And a raise. I'll tell her, Marcus said. See you at 2:40. Richard hung up. He shaved, put on his best suit, and drove to Teterboro Airport. He imagined the look on Maya's face when she had to hand him a check. He imagined the respect in the eyes of the other pilots when they saw him walk back in, untouchable. He pulled into the employee lot. His badge didn't work at the gate. No surprise, they had probably deactivated it. But Marcus buzzed him in. He walked into the main hangar. It was unusually quiet. The mechanics weren't working. The office staff was nowhere to be seen. In the center of the hangar floor, A long table had been set up. Maya Vance sat at the head of it. She was still wearing her pilot's uniform, looking sharp and intimidating. Next to her sat Mr. Hargrave. Richard faltered for a step. Why was the client here? "Richard," Maya said, her voice echoing in the vast space. "Please take a seat." Richard walked forward, regaining his swagger. "Mr. Hargrave, good to see you safely returned. I apologize for the inconvenience in Zurich. As you know, I had serious safety concerns regarding—" "Sit down, Richard," Hargrave said. His voice wasn't polite. It was a growl. Richard sat. He looked around. "Where are the lawyers? Where is the settlement agreement?" "We are skipping the settlement," Maya said, clasping her hands on the table. "We are moving straight to the closing arguments." "I don't understand," Richard frowned. "Marcus said you wanted to hire me back as a consultant." "I lied," Maya said simply. "I needed to make sure you were in the jurisdiction." "Jurisdiction?" Richard stood up. "What the hell is this? I'm leaving." "I wouldn't do that," a voice said from behind him. Richard turned. Emerging from the shadows of the maintenance bays were 3 men. 2 were wearing windbreakers with FBI emblazoned on the back. The 3rd man wore a suit and carried a badge from the FAA Flight Standards District Office. "Richard Sterling?" the FAA agent asked. "I'm Agent Kowalski from the FSDO, and these are special agents from the Cybercrimes Division." Richard's legs turned to jelly. He collapsed back into his chair. What is this?" "You are being served with an emergency order of revocation," Agent Kowalski said, slamming a document onto the table. "Your airline transport pilot certificate is hereby revoked, effective immediately." "Revoked?" Richard squeaked. "For what?" "Falsifying a safety report to a foreign aviation authority," Kowalski listed. "Interfering with a flight crew, and, let's see, reckless endangerment." "And the FBI is here for the rest," Maya added, standing up. She picked up the iPad. "Corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets. You emailed our client database to a competitor, Richard. Did you really think we wouldn't check the server logs?" Richard looked at the iPad. He looked at the FBI agents who were now taking out handcuffs. "But I was just—" Richard stammered, looking at Hargrave for help. "Mr. Hargrave, I did it for you, to get you a better carrier." "You sold my children's home address to a stranger," Hargrave said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "You are a disgrace to your profession. I will personally fund the legal team that ensures you never work in this industry again." The FBI agents stepped forward. "Richard Sterling, stand up and place your hands behind your back." "No, wait!" Richard cried, panic setting in. "It was a mistake. I was drunk. It was a joke. Maya, please. I have a pension. I have a mortgage." Maya walked around the table until she was standing right in front of him, just like on the stairs 2 days ago. "You told me to go find a job where I don't touch expensive machinery," Maya said softly. The agents clicked the handcuffs onto Richard's wrists. The metallic sound echoed through the silent hangar. "I think the prison library is hiring," Maya said. "They don't use machinery there, just books." "Get him out of here," Maya ordered. As Richard was frog-marched toward the exit, shouting and pleading, the hangar doors began to open. The afternoon sun flooded in, illuminating the gleaming GAOFD behind Maya. "That felt good," Mr. Hargrave admitted, watching the police car lights flash outside. "It did," Maya agreed. She turned to the client. "Mr. Hargrave, your car is waiting. We'll be ready for your next trip to Tokyo on Tuesday." "I look forward to it, Captain," Hargrave said. He left. Maya was finally alone in her hangar. The war was over. But there was one last thing to do. She walked over to the Captain of the Month plaque on the wall, which featured a picture of Richard Sterling smiling smugly. She took it down. She walked over to the trash can, but before she dropped it in, she heard a slow clapping. She turned around. It was David Miller. And behind him, the entire flight crew. Pilots, attendants, mechanics, who had been hiding in the offices, watching the takedown on the security monitors. They weren't just clapping, they were cheering. Maya watched her crew cheering. For the first time since she had signed the acquisition papers for the company, she didn't feel like an outsider fighting for respect. She felt like a leader who had protected her family. She dropped Richard's plaque into the metal bin. Clang. "Meeting in 10 minutes, Maya announced, her voice warm but commanding. "We have a lot of work to do to clean up the mess he left behind. But first—" "David?" David Miller stepped forward. "Yes, Captain?" "You're not a first officer anymore," Maya said. "I need a new chief pilot. Marcus is retiring early. I need someone who values integrity over ego. The job is yours if you want it." David beamed. "I won't let you down." 6 months later, the winter snow had melted in New Jersey, revealing a spring full of promise. Vance Aviation was no longer just a charter company. It was the premier private aviation firm on the East Coast. Under Maya's leadership, efficiency was up, and staff turnover was 0. On a crisp Tuesday morning, Maya pulled her car into a gas station on her way to the airport. She was piloting the G650 to London for the World Economic Forum. She walked into the convenience store to buy a bottle of water. As she stood in line, she noticed the man mopping the floor near the slushy machine. He wore a stained grey uniform with a name tag that read, Rick. He looked older, gaunt and tired. The arrogance that had once filled a room was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who had lost everything. It was Richard Sterling. After the FBI investigation, Richard had pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy prison sentence. The plea deal was harsh: 3 years of probation, a massive fine that wiped out his savings, and the permanent revocation of his pilot's license. He was grounded for life. No reputable company would hire him for anything involving security or management. He was 55, broke, and starting over at minimum wage. Maya paid for her water. As she turned to leave, her heels clicked on the floor, the same sound that had once echoed on the metal stairs of the jet. Richard stopped mopping. He looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment, Maya thought he might say something nasty. Instead, Richard just looked down at his mop bucket, shame burning his face crimson. He moved aside to let her pass. "Excuse me, ma'am," he mumbled, his voice a ghost of its former boom. Maya didn't stop. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply walked out the door, got into her car, and drove toward the runway where her jet and her sky was waiting. Richard Sterling had tried to keep her on the ground, but in the end, he was the one stuck cleaning up the dirt, while she was the one touching the clouds. Richard Sterling's downfall wasn't just caused by his arrogance. It was caused by his inability to see worth in anyone who didn't look like him. He mistook Maya's silence for weakness and her gender for incompetence. He thought he was the most powerful person in the room because he had the loudest voice, but he learned a brutal lesson. True power doesn't need to shout. It owns the building. In life, we often meet people like Richard, gatekeepers who try to block our path because of their own insecurities. But as Maya showed us, you don't win by screaming back. You win by being better, working harder, and knowing exactly who you are. When you own your value, no one can drag you down. Let Richard's fate be a reminder. Be careful who you step on while climbing the ladder, because you never know who owns the ladder. If this story of instant karma and justice gave you chills, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were in Maya's shoes? Would you have fired Richard immediately or played the long game like she did? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about toxic people getting exactly what they deserve, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.